The Natalie Wood mystery is finally solved, and it isn't good. For 4 decades, the death of Natalie Wood has been described as a tragic accident. A beautiful movie star who slipped from her yacht into dark waters off Catalina Island one November night in 1981. This version of events, initially accepted by authorities and the public alike, painted her death as a random tragedy. A terrible mishap that cut short a brilliant life and legendary career. But beneath this convenient narrative lies a disturbing collection of inconsistencies, changing testimonies and forensic evidence that tells a very different story. Today, we're examining the troubling truth behind one of Hollywood's most enduring mysteries. The death of Natalie Wood wasn't the simple accident we've been led to believe. From unexplained bruises to conflicting accounts, from delayed emergency calls to reopened investigations, the real story of what happened aboard the yacht's Splendor that night reveals a dark chapter in Hollywood history that powerful figures have worked for decades to keep hidden. What you're about to learn will transform how you see not just Natalie Wood's tragic end, but the forces that created and maintained a sanitized version of events that the evidence increasingly contradicts. The mystery of Natalie Wood's death isn't a mystery anymore, but the truth it reveals is more disturbing than most people are prepared to accept. The night of November 28, 1981 seemed routine enough. A holiday weekend boat trip to Catalina Island aboard the yacht Splendor with actress Natalie Wood, her husband Robert Wagner, her brainstorm co-star Christopher Walken, the boat's captain Dennis DeVerne. By the next morning, Wood's body would be found floating in the water. A hastily constructed narrative about an accidental drowning would begin taking shape. A narrative that has unraveled thread by thread in the decades since. To truly understand what happened to Natalie Wood, we need to examine 6 critical elements that standing evidence that points not to a tragic accident, but to something far more sinister. Let's uncover the carefully buried truth about Natalie Wood's final hours and the troubling questions that remain unanswered despite decades of investigation. Any work, and it made a very, very deep impression, more so than some other pictures that I did later. 1. She was found floating face down. But her injuries didn't match the story. On the morning of November 29, 1981, the body of Natalie Wood was discovered floating face down in the Pacific Ocean, approximately a mile away from the yacht Splendor, where she had been spending the Thanksgiving weekend with her husband, Robert Wagner, actor Christopher Walken, and the boat's captain, Dennis DeVerne. She was wearing only a nightgown and a down jacket, clothing inconsistent with someone who had deliberately set out in a small boat, but plausible for someone who might have fallen accidentally into the water. The initial explanation provided to authorities and the media aligned with this accidental scenario. According to the first statements from those aboard the yacht, Wood had apparently attempted to secure the yacht's dinghy. She had been banging against the hull and disturbing her sleep. In this version of events, she slipped while trying to adjust the small boat, falling into the cold waters where she ultimately drowned. This account seemed plausible on its surface. Wood was known to be uncomfortable around water, despite her glamorous image. A fear stemming from a childhood incident during a film shoot where she nearly drowned. The night had been dark, the waters rough, and alcohol had been consumed by all parties throughout the evening. The Los Angeles County coroner initially accepted this explanation, ruling her death an accidental drowning. But the physical evidence told a different story, one that began emerging even during the initial autopsy. Wasn't fully appreciated until forensic experts revisited the case. Decades later, Wood's body bore multiple fresh bruises on her arms, legs, and face that weren't consistent with a simple fall into water. More tellingly, she had scratches on her forearms that appeared defensive in nature, the kind typically seen when someone raises their arms to protect themselves during an altercation. The ocean didn't leave those bruises. Someone else did, observed one forensic pathologist who reviewed the autopsy findings decades later. This stark assessment cuts to the heart of the contradiction between the official narrative and the physical evidence. Bruises and abrasions that suggested violence rather than accident. Particularly suspicious was a series of bruises on Wood's wrists and forearms that appeared to be grab marks, consistent with someone having forcefully restrained her. These injuries weren't just random marks that might occur during a fall, but rather showed distinct patterns suggesting human hands had gripped her with significant force shortly before her death. The location and nature of these injuries became increasingly significant when considered alongside the fact that Wood was discovered wearing a down jacket over her nightgown. While initially portrayed as evidence, she might have been preparing to go outside voluntarily. The jacket's condition told a different story. It was unzipped and appeared to have been hastily thrown on or possibly placed on her rather than properly worn for deliberate protection against the elements. Also, inconsistent with the accidental fall theory was the condition of Wood's fingernails. Several were broken in patterns, suggesting she had frantically grabbed at something or someone shortly before entering the water. These broken nails contained no traces of wood or fiberglass that might be expected if she had been scrambling to hold onto the side of the yacht or dinghy during an accidental fall. Perhaps most damning was the timeline established by the coroner. Based on body temperature and other physiological indicators, Wood had been in the water for several hours before her body was discovered, a period during which no one aboard the yacht had reported her missing or initiated search procedures. Despite her alleged fear of water making an intentional solo boat excursion highly implausible, the autopsy revealed another crucial fact that contradicted the accident narrative. Wood's blood alcohol level, while elevated, was not high enough to significantly impair her judgment or physical coordination. This finding challenged the implicit suggestion that intoxication had contributed to a hypothetical accident. She wasn't so impaired that she would have been likely to attempt securing a dinghy alone at night, an action completely out of character given her documented fear of water. When all these physical findings are considered together, the pattern of bruises indicating restraint, the defensive scratches, the broken fingernails, and the timeline of her time in the water, they paint a picture radically different from the simple accident initially portrayed to the public. The evidence suggests not a woman who slipped and fell, but one who may have been involved in a physical altercation before somehow ending up in the water. A conclusion that raises disturbing questions about who might have been on the other side of that confrontation. They reopened the Natalie Wood thing. Do you ever comment on that? No, I never did. You wouldn't cooperate with the well I already had. 2. Her husband Robert Wagner changed his story multiple times. Robert Wagner's account of the events surrounding his wife's disappearance and death has undergone significant revisions over the years. Changes that raised troubling questions about what really happened aboard the Splendor that November night. These evolving explanations, rather than clarifying the situation, have created a pattern of inconsistency that investigators find highly suspicious. In his initial statements to authorities immediately after Wood's body was discovered, Wagner claimed he had been below deck watching television after everyone else had gone to bed. According to this first version, he only realized his wife was missing when he went to their stateroom around midnight and found she wasn't there. Wagner stated he assumed she had taken the dinghy to go ashore to the nearby yacht harbor on Catalina Island. Despite the fact that this would have been completely out of character for Wood, who was known to be afraid of dark water and was not known to operate the small boat alone, especially at night. This first account notably contained no mention of any arguments or tensions during the evening. Wagner portrayed the night as a pleasant, uneventful gathering of friends that somehow ended in tragedy when Wood inexplicably decided to leave the yacht alone in the middle of the night. However, as the investigation proceeded and other witnesses were interviewed, Wagner's story began to shift in significant ways. Within days, he acknowledged that there had been some tension aboard the yacht that evening, but characterized it as minor and unrelated to Wood's disappearance. He still maintained that he had no idea his wife was missing until he went looking for her around midnight. By the mid-1980s, Wagner's account had evolved further. In interviews and in his 1986 memoir, Pieces of My Heart, he admitted that he and Walken had engaged in a heated argument that evening, significant detail absent from his initial statements. According to this revised version, the argument centered around Juan's suggestion that Wood should prioritize her acting career over family obligations. Wagner claimed that after this argument, everyone retired to their respective cabins, and he still didn't realize Wood was missing until around midnight. The most dramatic revision came years later. By 2008, Wagner had further modified his account to acknowledge that he had actually ARG